Welcome back to Double Fries No Slaw, December 1st. And Richie, this long, painful, awful season, this abomination of Florida State football is finally over. I feel like as upset as I am about, how yesterday went down and going up to the game and all those things, it is almost a little bit of a celebration. It's a little bit of like I'm still going to be frustrated. I'm still going to probably talk some crap here tonight. But do you feel a little bit better? Does it feel better to have moved on a little bit?
I'm glad the season is over, and this is our last Sunday show, TJ, until next season.
But we still do Sunday shows.
Yeah,
we're not going anywhere like that.
The
Last game recap.
The game went exactly how you and I both basically predicted it. I think you predicted 34-10. It was 31-11. I think I predicted 34-13. It was no surprise what happened yesterday. And it is nice that the season is finally over. And I can actually, I'm going to be cautiously optimistic saying this, move on to Florida State basketball, because I think this team has a chance to send him out with a tournament appearance.
I'm too scarred to move on that quickly. But Double Fries No Slaw brought to you by Guthrie's in Tallahassee. You can visit both their locations, or all three of their locations, 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, and 2870 Appalachia Parkway. Make sure that you stop by Guthrie's and get your gut box Double Fries No Slaw. No, I am glad that it's over, and you're right. The game went about like we thought it would. I'll say this, I'm not trying, we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but on the game specifically, I thought there were some bright spots. I thought the defense played really, really well. I mean, they scored 31 points and 17 of that came off of turnovers. And so, I think one of those was kind of a long drive. So even if you said just 10 points off of turnovers, well, if you'd have lost that game 21-11, you wouldn't have felt that bad about it, or even if you had driven the ball down inside the goal line, and if you had scored instead of dropping the toss, which I don't know why we continue to go back to. I mean, there's 7 points there. I mean, I thought the team actually played outside of the turnovers. The offense, I thought, drove the ball fairly well. I thought the defense played really well. Fitz hit his one and only field goal. If you could have somehow eliminated the turnovers and sacks, which obviously you can't, and that's why you lost by 20, I actually thought they played. Is it a hot take to say I thought that was one of those better games that Florida State played yesterday? They ran the ball fairly well. They passed it fairly efficiently. The defense played well. It was just the catastrophic fumble after fumble after fumble that cost them. But outside of that specifically, I thought they actually played pretty well.
No, the team definitely, they showed some fight, which, is the bare minimum baseline, what you would expect for a game in a rivalry game to end the season. That's the bare minimum that you would expect. But they definitely showed that. And, it made watching the game somewhat bearable. But, Luke fought his ass off, man. He really did. He did not play great, but he certainly, when it was out there and, if he saw an open space, he was going to get as many yards as he could. The defense, I thought, played really well. When you fumble the ball 4 times, which and several times when you're either in the red zone or close to the red zone, it just makes it so much more difficult. And,
Sure.
I can't blame the defense at all. I thought the defense played really well. I think DJ Lagway is a potential Heisman candidate next year. He did not look like one yesterday, and it's not because he's a bad player. I think it's because Florida State's defense played that well.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at he played similarly to how Luke played, right?
Yeah.
He had minus the fumbles and he had a couple of touchdowns, but their completion percentage, their yardage was very similar. But yeah, just too many. There's a reason that Florida State's 2-10, right? There's a reason that they're as bad as they are. But yeah, the Florida's first touchdown, you fumble it, and what did you give them? What was this? A 14-yard drive to go get a touchdown, right? So there's 7 free points there. The muffed punt, shout out to the defense, which again stood up, and you gave up 10 points on the muffed punt. There are 10 points on those 2 right there alone. I mean, shoot, that backs us down to 21-11, and then yeah, I mean, you fumbled the ball once in field goal range. Nobody's saying you're guaranteed to make that for sure. And then you fumbled the ball down on the
He
goal
would have.
line.
It's Ryan Fitz. He would have made it.
Yeah, I mean, you fumbled the ball on the goal line and you fumbled the ball in field goal range. I mean, you lost by 20 and you gave away 10 points from fumbles and you cost yourself 10 points from fumbles. So, I mean, yeah, the difference, I thought both teams played almost identically. The yardage was very similar, efficiency was very similar. Florida State just turned the ball over a billion times. And it's really, when you think about it, they fumbled the ball 8 times, Richie, and lost 5 of them. It's really crazy they didn't lose by more. Like 5 fumbles, like it's kind of crazy that Florida only put up 31 points. And again, I think that's kind of a testament to the defense. The defense played really well yesterday. And as much as we've given them crap and it feels like at times the defense has quit, SMU, Notre Dame, other games, I thought they played really well. I think, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but I think there's some promising pieces on that defense that, we can kind of talk about here in just a bit.
Yeah, no, I thought the defense did everything they could, right? When the offense just simply cannot do anything. And again, I commend Luke for the effort he gave and what he did going after that that Florida defense. But the offensive line is still a disaster. Like there's no way around that. That offensive line is just a complete failure, and you see why Alex Atkins no longer has a job. And we'll talk more about coaches that probably won't have a job later. But yeah, I thought Luke did well. I thought Toafili, shout out him, man. Let me take a minute to give Lawrence Toafili some praise because he is a guy that has been here. He was recruited to Florida State. He's been here forever, and he just continued to fight and fight and fight every single second of the game, did everything he could. And for him to go out like that sucks because, man, he's a guy that any other time in Florida State history, like if he had played at Florida State in the 90s, he would be recognized as one of the greatest Florida State running backs of all time. He will not be recognized as that, and that is perfectly fair. But and for him to come out and fight like he did, and I did love that we saw a lot of young guys, freshmen, Danzy, Cromenhawk, making plays. There were some good things to take away. I don't want this to be all negative, but there were some positive takeaways from yesterday.
So if you're watching this, make sure you do hit the subscribe button. We certainly do appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody that is in the chat right now hanging out. Richie, after the game, things got a little bit heated. I don't know how much more you want to talk about the game. Again, it went kind of like we thought it would, and it is what it is. After the game, things got a little bit heated, and I have a take on this, but I want to get your take. So I don't have a massive problem with a team. I don't know if this makes me a bad Seminole or not, but I mean, I didn't have I watched it earlier in the Ohio State game too. I don't have a massive problem with a team planting a flag at midfield if they win. Now, I also don't have a problem with the coach or the other players on, the other roster going and removing that and throwing it. Like, I'm not saying you just let it stay there and salute it and walk off. But, the problem that I think comes from it is that there's no way to do that and tempers not flare over. Like we saw it 3 times yesterday, Florida State, the NC State, and the Michigan in the game. And so there's no way for it to happen and a fight not break out. And so that's where there's probably a little bit of an issue with it. Like you can't do that while everybody's there at midfield and not expect retaliation. But just in general, I don't have a huge problem with it. Like if you don't want that to happen, then go win the game. But it was also good to maybe see some tempers kind of flare, and I don't know, nothing else seems to motivate this group or these coaches or these players. So hopefully they maybe that'll help them next year. Remember getting embarrassed like that.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I'm a fan. I love it. I thought when we were watching, my wife and I were watching the Ohio State Michigan game, she's like, "Oh, this is terrible." I'm like, no, this is rivalry college football at its finest. I absolutely love it. I don't care if a few punches get thrown. I love what we're seeing right now. And when it happened in Tallahassee last night, it sucked, right? But you know how you stop that? What you just said, DJ. Don't let them win on your home field. If you win that game, guess what? That flag's never getting planted on that Seminole head. And the fact that you let them come in here and the score, I think, it is a little off from what the game really was, but that doesn't matter. Even if they won by 1 point and they plant that flag on your field, well, guess what? They earned it. Because when Florida State beats Florida, we take the gator head and we carry it all across the field. We cut up sod in every single stadium when we are an underdog and we win the game. So I have no problem with what Florida did. And I also have no problem with Mike Norvell because it was the first time, in my opinion, in the past few months, he's shown some fight. Like where has that Mike Norvell been? Where he ripped the flag out and threw it? That where has that Mike Norvell been all season long? And I need that Mike Norvell to show up to close out this recruiting class, which will not be good. But I need him to show up in fall camp, in spring practice. I need him to show up next season. And that's the Mike Norvell that we saw in previous years that I don't think we've seen this year. But I don't know if you got comfortable with the $10 million contract every year. But it was nice and refreshing to see him show up and go up and get in Billy Napier's face and say, that's not okay, and then go grab the flag, grip it out of the ground, and throw it away. That's the Mike Norvell I need moving forward.
Yeah, no, it was good to see him have some kind of passion. And Billy backed down pretty quickly. Like he was, in his press conference, he, was, oh, we're so sorry, and backing down from it, which I don't necessarily love that if I'm a Gator fan. I want him to say like, if you don't like it, then beat us, kind of like James Franklin did
100%.
yesterday. But I will say, I do think it's a little. I was talking with Allie about this on the way home today from Tallahassee. To me, it's a little bit different than like cutting up sod in the end zone or carrying the gator head around or things like that. Just because I think it's those things happen when it's like right in front of like kind of like what I said.
Yeah.
They're always going to it's always going to escalate into a fight. Like Florida State comes back out of the locker room like to cut the sod in the end zone when most of the crowd is like gotten off the field and doing it at midfield, like that you're about to start a fight there every time.
Well, I'm
and
fine
so
with that. I truly am.
if you're good, but I think they'll probably, because it happened 3 times this weekend, I bet they'll probably come up with some kind of rule about it.
Yeah.
I can't guarantee that, but I would imagine that the NCAA or these conferences will say like, hey, you got to tell your kids, like, we're going to fine you if you do this, because there's no way that to do it and it not escalate into a fight. We can say, oh, well, Florida State sucked and they didn't show, but Florida State could have been 10-2 and Florida could have been 10-2 or 9-2 or whatever. And this could have been like 2 good teams. And if it had been a 1-point game, they like went down to and it happened, like there's going to be a fight, just like there was at Michigan and Ohio State, And so I think that's kind of what you're probably trying to avoid if you're most of these programs and colleges. So I don't know. But yeah, overall, don't have a huge problem with it. If you Florida State players and fans, somebody got mad at me for tweeting this, Richie. I don't really understand why, but Florida State showed more effort defending the flag in midfield than they showed defending their honor all year. So good, plant the flag. Maybe it'll piss some guys off, and they'll either transfer out or they'll play better next year.
I'll say that the team did fight. I will say they did not quit last night. I was watching that game, very intently, and I can say the team did not quit. They're just not any good. Like that's the problem. They're just not a good football team. But they definitely did not quit on the coaching staff, on the fans, or anyone that last night. They are just not a very good football team. And when you fumble the ball as often as you did and lose the fumbles, that's what happens. That's the result you get. But, again, Florida planting the flag, it is what it is. I don't blame them. If I'm a 18, 20-year-old kid and I in an alternate universe where I'm an elite athlete and I could play at a high level college football program, I would plant the flag too. I would do the exact same thing. Hell, we stormed the field when my high school team beat a rival in back in my senior year. Like it is what it is. I don't blame Florida, but I'm happy that Mike stood up and did what he had to do. The fight doesn't bother me at all because it wasn't egregious. There were no people throwing helmets or anything like that. Um, but yeah, man, it's that's rivalry college football. That's why we love this sport. That's why it's my favorite sport in the world.
Yeah, don't have a huge issue with it. So, garnetandgold.com. If you are shopping this holiday season, make sure that you shop at garnetandgold.com. Use our code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for 15% off your order. Appreciate Garnet and Gold for all of their support here on the channel through, they've worked with several thousand FSU students down through the years and given back to our NIL, our boosters. And so make sure that you're thinking about Garnet and Gold when you are doing your holiday shopping this year. NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for 15% off. Richie, we have an offensive coordinator coming to Tallahassee. Are you fully on the Gus bus? What are your thoughts here?
So it was funny. I saw on the timeline yesterday, there was a lot of mixed emotions about bringing in Gus Malzahn. I'm all in. I truly am. And, I put a tweet out that said, Gus Malzahn took a Nick Marshall-led Auburn team to the national championship game, a game I think we were both at in Pasadena. And that's crazy and alone for me. But I also think he runs a very similar offense to Mike Norvell. He wants to establish the run and throw the ball when he needs to. And I think that's what Mike does, and that's what Gus does. And I think Mike Norvell giving over all play calling duties to Gus Malzahn is a huge thing in terms if he wants to try and turn this program around. I don't know if he will. And I'm not sitting here telling you that he will. I think that is a huge deal. I'm wearing my Gus Malzahn visor right now. Florida State had it for years, but in honor of Gus, I decided to wear it tonight. I'm a huge fan of the hire, and there's a lot of people who hate it, which, I'm not going to argue with you guys. If you hate the hire, you hate the hire. I personally love this hire, TJ.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to any hire. And to me, I don't have a real strong opinion either way. I think I'm more in favor of it than I am opposed. I think the biggest thing to me is, he'll immediately probably grab you a couple of people off of UCF's commit list and probably some of the better players off their roster if everything works out really well there, right? Which rating UCF's roster to fix Florida State is not really the idea. But if he can bring in a difference maker or two, then you certainly would love that, especially in the trenches.
Was pretty solid.
Yeah, especially in the offensive line or maybe a linebacker. I don't know their roster super well, but I do think there's some positives there. UCF's also been recruiting fairly well, and they've had a couple of 4-stars decommit already since this news has happened. And so do they come with Gus? Do they not? I don't know. We'll see. I do think that could be something that's pretty interesting to see. And then I also think that, like, at this point, he has recruited at the highest level. Like, he's recruited in the SEC. And so can he sell that? Can that be part of what he brings and helps you with? And then, yeah, from the play calling perspective, I think this is a pro and a con. I do think it's a pro that Mike's giving it up. I also, I don't know that I'm all the way sold that what he did in 2014 translates to today as much. Because a lot of time has passed since then. And, it's not necessarily like, oh, he's just going to pick it right back up and we're going to have a top 10 offense in college football. To me, it really just kind of comes down to how good the Jimmy and Joes are, right? Like, if the offensive line gets better, then, what he wants to do will probably work. If we don't improve the offensive line, you could have God running, calling the plays, and it would not work because we can't block anybody. And so, to me, that's, is that a con? Is that just, that's why I'm not like, oh, this is definitely going to work. This is definitely, because again, it's more about the players that you bring in. Can the offensive line just be average next year? And to me, that's the biggest question mark. But, for the people that are like totally again, you're bringing in a guy who's got SEC head coaching experience, and then again, Power Four level head coaching experience. And you've seen this not work out when coaches have done this, and you've seen it work out. Like look at Chip Kelly and others that have kind of taken this role. And so I don't think there's anything to say like, oh, this is definitely a slam dunk, like Florida State's back, but there's also nothing to say that this isn't going to help Florida State's chances or help us improve some.
Yeah, and I think a name to keep an eye on is Herb Hand, right? He's the offensive line coach at Florida. He was a 3-time finalist for Offensive Line Coach of the Year at the University of Texas. If you get him with Malzahn, I think that's a really big deal. And again, this is not me citing any inside information or anything like that, but I do think that's a true possibility because Gus Malzahn, he would not resign. And you could say UF or UCF is going to fire him. I don't think they would have. But he's not agreeing to come to Florida State as an offensive coordinator without full responsibility of calling the plays and bringing some people along with him. So I just think that's a name to keep an eye on. I think keep an eye on Herb Hand.
Yeah, I also think there could be some continuity there too. Like, Gus kind of failed at UCF at this point. So, like, where is he really going to go out and get another job? I think you could have Gus here for, I don't know, 3-4 years plus if things turn around and start to work out, which I am still of the belief that Mike probably doesn't fix this thing, right? Like, he probably, it's more likely than not that he doesn't turn it all the way around. But for the people that are freaking out about it, oh, this is the worst thing ever, I can't believe this, they're the same people that want Norvell fired. And so, like, if you want Norvell fired, which we have our beliefs or opinions on that, right? Like that's fine. But if your goal is for Norvell to get fired and you hate the offensive coordinator hire, then this is helping you accomplish that goal, right? Like this is either going to work out or it's not. Like this is not like oh man, let's see how we are in 2026, 2027. This is, hey, Mike's trying to win right now. And so if they don't get to like Richie 7, 8+ wins, I don't think he's the coach in 2026. And so
no,
it's not like a long-term, like, oh, let's see if it turns around. Let's see if it fixes or not. It's, man, you're going to try and win right now or you're gone. And so, shoot, let's go for it. Again, I think people make too much of the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator are certainly important. But again, to me, it's, can you get a quarterback that's somewhat competent? I think Luke showed you some good things on Saturday night against Florida. I think he showed you some flashes. Is he ready? Is he, set to start against Alabama? I don't know, right? Like what happens between now and then? Can the pocket presence change? Can it improve? But man, if you can, I don't care if you get the go-go guy or you get Malzahn or you have Norvell calling plays again next year. If you just had a competent offensive line and competent quarterback play, you probably go 6-6 this year. Right? Like that's just, like that's as simple as I can say it. If your offensive line wasn't dog crap and your quarterback play wasn't dog crap for most of the year, you probably go 6-6, right? And so, like, to me, that's where I'm like, well, if Gus can just elevate that a little bit and you can have decent offensive line play, decent quarterback play, you're probably fine. Now, obviously, they have a lot of other things to figure out, but I don't know. The freak out over the Malzahn stuff is funny to me.
Yeah, no, I don't get the freak out at all. Again, you got a head coach who was the offensive coordinator under Cam Newton, who won the Heisman Trophy and won a national title, and then became the head coach at Auburn and took them to the national title game. I know this was a long time ago. I get that. Fully understand that. But the credentials are there. Like, I am fully on board with this hire. I'm probably more on board than probably 80% of Florida State's fan base right now. And I'm okay with that because I will stand on this. And, a year from now, TJ, when we do this show wrapping up the season, if it didn't work out, I will own it. But I do think this is going to work out offensively.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, you can have your take, but I mean, it all kind of falls on Norvell, right? Like he's the one, you're just taking a take on it, right? Like he's staking his career on it. So, I mean, a lot less risk for you. All right, let's keep this going and just keep it on the Gus. We'll just keep this on the same thing, Harlan. But you mentioned Hand maybe coming in an offensive line. I have a take here. I think that. What are your thoughts on like it's as far as when we're recording this, 6:30 at night on Sunday. We haven't seen any coaching changes yet, unless I'm just unless something happened over the last 30 minutes and just hasn't come out yet. But I expect more coaching changes. I will say, man, it's funny that the defense actually played fairly well under Randy Shannon these last two games, but I still think he's probably hitting the road. I still think that more changes need to be made than just Randy Shannon. So what are you have thoughts on other coaches that should or will go or what that may look like?
Yeah, I guess we're in the business of naming names now, so let's do it. I think Coach Yak can go. Your running back coach should be a recruiter. Like you're not teaching. Like Dalvin Cook was not developed at Florida State. He was just a phenomenal talent. Work done. Leon Washington. It doesn't matter. Those guys were going to be good no matter where they went. They were not developed. Chris Thompson, tight end coach, should be one of your best recruiters. That's what Tim Brewster was when he was at Florida State. He was a recruiter. He was not. You're not here to develop tight ends. Um, Coach JP, he can go too. That the special teams the last few weeks of the season was disgusting and embarrassing. Randy Shannon, he can go. We talked about this maybe 2 weeks ago, TJ. There's not a coach on this roster that I would be upset if we let them go. I would love to see Patrick Surtain stay at Florida State. I don't think that's likely, but he's the only guy that I would be upset if Mike Norvell chose to move on from him. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good with resetting the thing completely. Now, I don't necessarily think that happens. I think that a couple of guys will be retained for some continuity. And if that's what Mike wants to do at the end of the day, then, in theory, I guess I'm okay with it. Not super okay with it, but, I certainly wouldn't be okay with keeping Randy. I think David Johnson does need to go. I just heard, I'm not trying to pull one of those like, oh, well, I've heard certain things, but like just not a great recruiter, and lost out on his one recruit that was here. I mean, I understand that they got Cam Davis and Danzy. Cam Davis grew up a Florida State fan, and we've and Danzy was a local kid that committed. So I don't know. I don't think his recruiting has been very good. He's also the recruiting coordinator. And I've also just, again, not trying to play I've heard some things, but his recruiting, just effort from what I've been told is just not very good as far as, I don't know, just kids saying that he doesn't even reach out, that isn't even like trying, right? Like, from Chroma to, the Byron Lewis that just flipped to Florida. Like, if Dugan's got fired for not landing any wide receivers the year after he brought in 4 stars, then Yak can go too. Now, I think he's got a little bit better relationship with Mike, and so Mike might keep him. But I think he needs to go. I know there's been some talk about maybe moving Yak to wide receiver coach. I think that's a terrible idea, a terrible decision. And the recruiting that's been mediocre under Ron Dugans at that position will go to like pure trash. And I'd love to be wrong on this, prove me wrong, Yak. But I don't believe that he's just going to flip a switch and be a great recruiter. Could the battles end, help out and just overpay guys? Yeah, absolutely. But I'd say you need to move on there. I think you need to move on from JP. I'm not a huge fan there. I don't care what he did out of the portal. He just refuses to recruit, or kind of another thing, right? Like just the effort's not there. I've talked to people that have, literally heard JP say like, oh, I don't care about high school recruiting. Like I'll just get him out of the portal later. Well, look how well that's worked out. So I'd be okay moving on there. I don't have a real strong opinion on Chris Thompson or Tony Tokar's, take it or leave it, like whatever. Obviously, I think Odell needs to retire or move off field. I don't care what people think about that or not. He's a great guy. You're whiffing too much at those positions. I don't care if it was, Facebook memory came up yesterday. It was like the day before Jimbo left, and it said something like I Facebooked something like once they forced Coach Bowden out, my loyalty to coaches, just became zero, and so obviously I was talking about Jimbo with that, but I mean, shoot, they forced Bobby Bowden out because he was slipping. Like if Odell is not landing recruits, like as good of a guy as I think he is, like we got to recruit. We're getting gashed in the middle. You got to have defensive linemen come in. And maybe they keep Kevin Wynn. Probably not. Signing days on Wednesday. We'll find out. But yeah, we're probably going to go over at defensive line and defensive tackle again this year. So I mean, that's just got to get better, and if Odell can get better than that, then great. If not, I think you got to move on there too. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. Like, just if you want to clean the entire house, then clean the entire house. I'd be fine with Surtain staying. I don't think he's been. I think he's just been the best of a bad staff, and so that's why I think people love him. I don't think he's been like otherworldly by any means. I think he's a great teacher and a good developer and stuff. But at the end of the day, I think Florida State DBs kind of recruit themselves. You can land really good DBs with just a minimal amount of effort, and so I'm not even like that upset if and when Surtain leaves. Tokar stays for continuity. That's fine. I know he's got a good relationship with both Brock and Luke. If Thompson stays, I don't have a huge. I'd rather upgrade with Thompson, but I don't have a huge issue with that. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Now that I've just crapped on every single coach on Florida State's roster, it's hard not to crap on people, I guess, when you're 2-10. So,
and I think Brock is gone at this point because Mike basically sent the message, very publicly that Luke is the future in his mind, unless you can, bring in a Chris Winkie and then maybe a Haynes King next year. But my gosh, what a great game that Georgia Tech game was. Maybe we can touch on that at the end of the show, but that was phenomenal. But yeah, I like Tony Tokar's, but he's not a great recruiter. We don't have a great recruiter on staff. Pat Surtain is the guy that should be the best recruiter. But again,
I don't even think he's a great recruiter, just to be honest.
Yeah, but to your point, defensive back is the one position in the state of Florida, if you're recruiting at Florida State, that you're going to get blue chip guys no matter what. Like there are so many of them that they will come to Florida State. You will sign them, but can you develop them? And I believe he can. And he's the one guy that he's the only assistant on this staff that I say I would absolutely hate to see him leave. I want him here. And we'll see what happens. But yeah, everybody else, I'm not. Odell is the one that's a kind of emotional, right? Because they call him the furniture. Like you get him with the house, and it just sucks that you realize that his time is probably done, but at the same time, it needs to happen. But he's done more for Florida State than anybody other than Bobby Bowden or Mickey Andrews. Like he's been here forever, and you hate to see that era come to an end. But I think it is time for that to come to an end.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate what you've done, but it's costing Florida State too much. You can't just hold on forever. So, all right, Richie, give Roback some love. We'll talk about some players, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, just roback.com, RHOBACK.com. Use promo code DFNS20. That is DFNS20. You will get 20% off your first purchase from roback.com. I'm wearing the Florida State Roback polo hoodie right now. It is honestly the most comfortable hoodie I've had. I have multiple polos. They are all phenomenal. Definitely go check them out. I promise you, if you buy from them, you will buy from them again. So use, again, promo code DFNS20 at RHOBACK.com, and you will definitely become a lifetime customer. I've been buying from them since before we partnered with them on this podcast, but I'm extremely excited that they chose to partner with us.
Richie, we talked a little bit about coaches that we didn't, if there was anybody we wanted to leave or not. So let's talk a little bit about players. Are there, I think there are some guys that show flashes. Let's talk about some guys that you don't want to see go, right? Because obviously the portal's about to open up in a little over a week here. We're going to have some guys that jump out. There's a lot of guys that I am very excited about not having to watch play Florida State football anymore. But there are some young guys that I would hate to lose at this point. I've got some ideas. I've got some names, but why don't you give me a few of yours and then we'll go on.
So Luke, I think, is the guy that, if Brock leaves, that would suck. But at the same time, I think it'd be best for Florida State and for Brock for him to move on at this point. Clearly, Mike's made up his mind. I think that's an easy one. Hakeem Williams is a guy that I would love to see stay at Florida State, and I do think he has a lot of potential. And maybe with Ron Dugan's out of the door now and whoever's coming in, I think that that's a lot of opportunity as far as that goes. Singleton, I thought he ran hard against Florida. I really do. He ran really well. Omar Graham Jr., Blake
Yeah.
Nicholson, those are kind of the first guys to come to my mind.
Yeah, I think the tight ends are, obviously a lot of the ones you
Landon
mentioned
Thomas, yeah.
jump in my mind. I think Landon Thomas and Amari Williams both have really promising futures. I know he had the muff punt yesterday, but some of the young wide receivers with McCoy and Moore.
McCoy could be a stud. I
Yeah,
think he could be a stud.
it's hard
Yeah.
for me to be too mad at him for the one fumble when you had 7 other ones in the game too. But yeah, I think he would be big. I love the way Edwin Joseph played yesterday. I think there's some young DBs that are really good, Quindarius Jones and others that whether they had big games yesterday or not, I
Hussey's
think were
number
really
one.
big. If there was any, so here's one that's not even a young guy. I don't know if you could offer, Azariah Thomas like an NIL package to come back and try and improve his draft stock. To me, he's a maybe round 3 or 4 guy, but could he improve that with a little bit better year? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not saying he definitely could, and I'm not trying to. I don't have like a draft grade for him. Maybe he's even lower, but I think that's somebody that if you could kind of NIL package for him, that would be one that maybe makes sense. I think that Daniel Lyons, there's some young defensive linemen that you'd want to go get. There's some young offensive linemen like Otto and early and stuff but I don't really see those guys leaving anyway. So I'm not like super worried about that. But yeah, I mean, I think there's some promising pieces that like have done some good things, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought Norvell was kind of weird in the press conference, like making, when he was talking about like guys leaving or whatever, like, oh, if they want to leave, then, I mean, you're 2-10, bro. Like if you want to leave, like, how do you, oh, well, then they're not a real one. I don't know, man. Like, you're not a real one, bro. You just went 2-10. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but like, don't be getting on the kids for leaving a dumpster fire. Like, if my house is burning down, I ain't gonna, oh, look how brave I am for sticking it out. Especially if I end up at BC or something, that's one thing. But if George is offering me money, man, like, shoot, I got to consider my options here. But I do think, how they not only do in the portal when they go and look at guys, but also trying to hold guys in. I think he's going to have a hell of a job to try and retain this roster.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I would never want to be a college football coach because you have to recruit high school, you have to recruit the portal, and you have to recruit your own roster. And that is such a task to do, especially coming off a 2-10 season. How do you tell your kids that currently are on your roster, hey, stay at Florida State, this is where we want you? How do you convince other players from the portal that, hey, come to Florida State, you may only have 1 or 2 years left, but we're going to compete for a national title? And how do you convince high school kids that, hey, come here, we're building something special? It's almost an impossible job. And to your point earlier, I don't think Mike turns this around, but that is the job that these guys have to do. If I was a college football coach and I had an opportunity to get to the NFL, I would take it instantly.
Yeah, I think the one thing that benefits Mike is like when you look at it, like how many teams out there really are competing for national titles. So like not being able to sell that is to me like not the biggest deal. 7, 8, 10, I want to say 10, 12, really like not even 12. Like let's be real with ourselves. Like kids aren't going to, you look at the teams that are ranked 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, like those teams aren't really competing for national titles. Now, is the field a little bit more open this year?
They won't be there next year either. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know. Like, I don't think that that's something. Now, if you're going head to head with Bama or Oregon or Georgia or teams like that, then yeah, I mean, you're not going to be able to sell that. But I do think the portal is mostly about, playing time and money, like it's, get me to the NFL and pay me. And that's what, kids want. Because most of these kids know that they're not, competing for a title necessarily. But though in the ACC, like it doesn't take much to get to the conference championship. Unless you're Miami, then obviously it's pretty tough to do. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're going to have to be aggressive in the portal. There's a lot of guys on this roster, though. We don't have to name the names on this one, but there are a lot of guys on this roster that, yeah, Florida State needs to. We'll just say this: needs to revamp the entire defensive line.
Yes.
Like, needs to move on from there. And to me, when you look at next year, we've talked about this, but I kind of like the linebackers. I kind of like the defensive backs. I kind of like the wide receivers, running backs, some of the young talent that's there. It comes down to the trenches, offense and defensive line, and quarterback. And what can they do there? Do you go get a quarterback in the portal? Well, I think that depends on how good the player is. Is there a Cam Ward level player that jumps in the portal? If so, you better go get him, right? Because that's probably the difference in 3 or 4 wins. If not, you probably should ride with Luke, And so, yeah, and then offense and defensive line, like you're going to have a lot of work to do because to me, that's what it's going to come down to. Like next year's success or failure won't have anything to do with the coordinators, won't have anything to do with Mike. It'll be offense and defensive line. Did we retool that? Did we keep the guys we want to keep? Did we go out and get guys that'll help? If so, we'll be fine. If not, probably be Mike's last year in Tally.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. Football games are won in the trenches, right? A guy like Trent Dilfer does not win a Super Bowl without an amazing defense that starts up front with that defensive line, right? Brad Johnson, we love him. He's a Florida State guy. He graduated from Florida State. He's been on our podcast, right? He was not a phenomenal NFL quarterback, but he won a Super Bowl because he had amazing trenches like guys like Warren Sapp there for him. So that's kind of where we are. And I agree 100%, TJ. We have to revamp the trenches. And this offensive line is the first place that we need to look because it has been atrocious since you and I were in Dublin to when you were in Tallahassee on Saturday.
Yeah, and it just got worse and worse and worse. I even joked that, is there a way that we could I'm not trying to be a jerk, but fire Atkins again for how bad the offensive line was playing after 7 or 8 sacks in one game against a mid-Florida team. It was certainly something to behold. So, okay, big shout out to Syracuse though for keeping Miami away from the ACC championship game. At this point, Miami would need some chaos, in my opinion, to get into the college football playoff. I think they're out. I don't think it's a done deal. And if they sneak their way, backdoor their way in, I'll be pretty pissed. But
let me say something on that real quick.
I do think they're out.
When it comes to Syracuse, my dad was a huge Syracuse fan of all sports. Ernie Davis, Jim Brown. He grew up in upstate New York. Huge Florida or Syracuse fan, and just to see that happen last night was awesome. And the fact that it was against Miami was even better. But just the fact that I know my dad is watching down, and he's probably jumping up and down because he was more chaotic than I am when I watch Florida State games. That was just an awesome game to see. And Mario, what are you doing kicking a field goal there? You gotta go for the touchdown.
Yeah, they had a 21-0 lead. Like, I was at Bowden's. I don't know if you've ever been to Bowden. No, I don't think you have because it's newer.
No.
So I don't think you've been up there. But I was at Bowden's and I was watching it with my buddy, and we were just about to walk over to the parking lots and stop by a tailgate or two. And it was 21-0. And I looked over and it was like 21-7. And I was like, oh, okay, well, at least they're fighting back a little bit. And it was 21-14. And by the time we got over to the parking lot, because I just didn't have my phone out, it was bad service and everything else. We got over to the parking lot and got to my buddy's tailgate. He had it on the TV. It was 20, and they had taken the lead. And I was like, no way. And so, shout out to Syracuse. And again, Mario they didn't beat one ranked team all season. They got to play the worst Florida State team of all time. They got to play Florida before Florida got hot. And obviously Florida started Mertz. Maybe that's different with Lagway in there. And obviously Florida's gotten better as the year has gone on. Like, they had the easiest schedule of all time. And they lost to Georgia Tech A very beat up Georgia Tech team with a Haynes King that could not throw the ball, and Syracuse as huge favorites in both games, double-digit favorites in both games. It is hilarious. Now, Mario's always going to be a great recruiter. He's going to do a good.
Wait, can we give a shout out to Syracuse's head coach, Fran Brown, who in his post-game press conference said, Dabo, you're welcome. I got you to Charlotte.
Dude,
That was amazing.
yeah. And I just, the way that Miami blows it every year, and they were louder this year than they've ever been. This was their dream season. They spent millions more than most programs out there on NIL. The fact that they blew it
is what I put on Twitter, and people were questioning me. I said, no, I just need it, but I don't know.
Make it up. Who cares? That was the best part of the weekend to me. So go Syracuse. Any other shout outs from you?
No other shout outs, just a shout out to everyone who tunes in every week. You know, this was a terrible season, obviously 2-10, but for everyone who shows up every Sunday, Wednesday, and also every day when TJ posts his videos, we just really, really appreciate all of you and hope you continue to show up for us. Just thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, a month to go until the end of the year. This has been a fun year on the channel, not so much on the football field, but we do appreciate all of you. And again, I appreciate Syracuse for doing the Lord's work this weekend. So,
go Orange.
Yeah, go orange. The only thing orange that I like, the Syracuse orange. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, thank you guys for hanging out. Crappy year, but thank God it's over. We'll have a ton on coaching. We'll have a ton on the portal, recruiting, signing day coming up. So make sure you're subscribed. Don't miss any of it. We'll have a bunch of stuff coming out this week. Appreciate you guys for hanging out. Talk to you soon. Go Noles.
Okay, I found this on